In this pod-slice summary of the Ben Shapiro Show, Ben Shapiro dives straight into the dire economic situation in America. As he discusses President Joe Biden's plunging approval ratings and his economic policies driving America into a possible recession, he criticizes Republicans for not taking advantage of this situation in the run-up to the 2024 elections. Instead, he claims that Republicans are being strategically inept and indulging in infighting, thereby weakening their stance. Shapiro refers to the situation as infuriating, as he wishes to see the Democrats' influence weaken over policymaking in the U.S., seeing it as a demotion for Republicans. Shapiro mentions the losses they've suffered, including around 11 governorships and 20-plus House seats. This is occurring in spite of the declining popularity of Democrat policies and their tilt towards the radical left. He suggests that the problem isn't the politicians themselves, but the incentive structures that produce them. He believes minor changes, such as replacing key figures, have little impact without more profound systematic changes. One example Shapiro provides is the replacement of Paul Ryan, John Boehner, and Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. Diving into more detail about the recent event where Kevin McCarthy was ousted from his Speaker position, Shapiro refers to it as an irrational move. He criticizes Republicans backing this change, pointing out that the decision was backed by only 8 Republicans and yet drastically altered the power dynamics within the House. The host bemoans the current incentive structure, which prioritizes individual recognition and career advancement over collective goals and party unity. According to him, McCarthy was a notably conservative speaker who had several wins against Biden, so his removal seems like reckless political showmanship rather than a strategic move. The disruptions within the Republican Party are happening at a time when the Democrats are highly vulnerable, especially economically. Shapiro highlights the tumbling stocks, highest Treasury yields since 2007, and the possible recession looming over America as potential issues to leverage during election campaigns. However, instead, the Republicans are losing focus and distracting the American public with undesired internal battles. Towards the end, Shapiro also mentions Matt Gaetz's recent attempt to leverage McCarthy's promise of a no-confidence vote anytime to gain international political recognition. Shapiro continues to explore events around Kevin McCarthy's ouster from the Speaker position, pointing out the motivations behind the actions of some Republicans, including Representative Matt Gaetz. He views the move as political grandstanding and explains how current political incentives drive politicians to make such decisions. Shapiro quotes political theorist Yoli Nis, who's noted that the modern political class uses Congress and political power as platforms for other ends. Shapiro furthers this by stating that the incentive is no longer about making meaningful change, but about grandstanding and gaining recognition through making noise on major issues. He then highlights the contradiction in Matt Gaetz's behavior, pointing out that Gaetz had opposed the removal of Paul Ryan when he was Speaker, yet was instrumental in McCarthy's ouster. He suggests this shift is not due to any meaningful ideological change, but rather the realization that shouting and ranting can win favor among certain groups. Shapiro emphasizes that these disruptions within the Republican Party are happening at a time when America faces critical economic problems, and yet Republicans seem to digress into petty internal battles. He criticizes the lack of strategic approach, arguing that rather than ousting someone like McCarthy, who had several wins against Biden, the Republicans should have been working collectively towards the upcoming elections. Shapiro also mentions how the change in the Speaker position was backed by just 8 Republicans, but significantly altered the power dynamic within the House. The politicians named in the motion include Andy Biggs of Arizona, Ken Buck of Colorado, Tim Burett of Tennessee, Eli Crane of Arizona, Bob Good of Virginia, Nancy Ma of South Carolina, and Matt Rosendale of Montana. He further criticizes that the replacements suggested for McCarthy, like Jim Jordan from Ohio and Chip Roy from Texas, all supported McCarthy and opposed his removal. This again shows a lack of clear strategy in attempting to oust the Speaker. Shapiro goes on to analyze McCarthy's defense speech against the removal, calling it an act of personal pique from a small group within the party for their benefits, contrary to the interests of the party and the movement at large. The removal, according to Shapiro, was motivated more by personal political advantage than the larger success of the Republican Party. Lastly, Shapiro highlights important endorsements for McCarthy. Representative Elise Stefanik, despite falling more to the left wing of the Republican Party, praises McCarthy for his tireless efforts and successful initiatives. Similarly, Representative Thomas Massie from the far right, despite his strict stance on reduced spending, throws his support behind McCarthy. Nevertheless, despite such support, a small number of Republicans managed to create chaos and shift the power dynamics significantly. In this episode of The Ben Shapiro Show, Shapiro discusses the fallout from Kevin McCarthy's ouster as the Speaker, particularly the role of Representative Matt Gaetz in the process. Shapiro criticizes Gaetz's argument for not aligning with Trump or the right wing of the party, both supporting McCarthy. He also underlines Trump's absence during the ouster, despite McCarthy's loyalty to him. Gates's speech against McCarthy is examined by Shapiro, who criticizes it as failure theater and questions its lack of substantial arguments or new strategic directions. The move, according to Shapiro, is more about fundraising and gaining political traction rather than making advancements for conservatives. Shapiro then expands on Gates's criticism of his Republican colleagues, emphasizing how the accusations are based on a simplistic view of how legislation works. He calls out the perceived hypocrisy of Gates's fundraising strategies and accuses him of smearing his colleagues in an attempt to earn political points. He also challenges Gates's fiscal irresponsibility, bringing up the fact that Gates endorsed a presidential candidate who made no effort to cut entitlement programs. He accuses Gates of deliberately misleading his audience by putting up a veneer of fiscal conservatism while supporting candidates who would increase national debt. The ousting of McCarthy, according to Shapiro, wasn't about McCarthy's leadership, but a calculated ploy by some Republicans to gain political momentum and financial backing by appearing as outsiders fighting against the establishment. This occurrence, he argues, is not indicative of a party poised to win elections, but rather a party fracturing itself for individual political gain. The discussion then shifts to potential replacements for McCarthy. Shapiro criticizes the lack of defined successors, arguing that it's a less appealing position given the divided state of the caucus. He highlights the endorsement of McCarthy by several high-profile Republicans, including Jim Jordan, Elise Stefanik, and Steve Scalise. Shapiro also underscores McCarthy's defense, in which he claims that those who voted against him aren't conservatives. In McCarthy's view, they chose to upset party unity and compromise conservative governance for the sake of their personal political ambitions. Shapiro wraps up this segment by highlighting that these types of disruptive tactics do not lead to electoral victories or meaningful policy changes. Instead, he suggests Republicans should focus on offering a strategic plan for winning elections and making progress on their policy priorities. In a continuation of the Ben Shapiro Show episode, Shapiro expresses frustration about the Republican Party's focus. Echoing Greg Grugan's sentiment, he feels that internally focusing on Kevin McCarthy's removal as the Speaker serves only as a distraction from their political rivals' shortcomings, specifically highlighting the Democrats' numerous missteps. He continues to criticize the ousting of the Speaker as a strategy to disturb party unity, for personal political gain rather than bringing any policy or regulation benefits. As he tackles the issue, Sheldon mocks the idea that if you weren't pleased with a House Speaker or an employee, you could simply replace them using technological solutions. His comments seem concerned with the more significant impact such changes could have on the party's unity and overall political strategy, as well as the effectiveness of such methods. Shapiro questions the wisdom of promoting candidates who have previously been unsuccessful, pointing to former Arizona governor candidate Kari Lake as an example. He also underlines the importance of a strategical plan for achieving electoral victory, criticizing the persistence of some candidates with slim chances, such as Tim Scott, of obtaining the Republican nomination. The discussion then veers towards the legal troubles of former President Donald Trump, arguing that if the focus of the 2024 campaign is solely Trump's legal issues, he will not win. Shapiro doesn't dispute the unfairness of the legal actions against Trump, but states that a candidate not embroiled in legal battles could be more beneficial for the party. Shapiro further draws attention to the worsening economic situation under President Biden, asserting a potential pending recession. He accuses the Democrats of strategically putting Trump on trial to divert attention from economic problems and other issues causing popularity loss for their party. He cautions the Republicans against playing into this diversion by nominally selecting Trump, arguing that doing so is aligning Republicans with the Democrats' strategy. He believes that the Republican Party's priority as conservatives should be preventing Joe Biden from continuing his presidency. In the later part of the episode, Shapiro highlights the increasing crime rates in various American cities. He points to two victims of the crime uptick, both being social justice advocates and journalists who were murdered in major cities. Shapiro uses this unfortunate news to cast aspersions on the ongoing defund the police movement. Shapiro also draws attention to a thwarted carjacking attempt on Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar, using this incident to further emphasize the worsening crime situation in the Democratic cities. Frustrated by the Democrats' response to the surge in violent crimes with partisan blame games, he criticizes White House Deputy Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre for evading responsibility and attributing crime, such as street stabbings, to Republicans objecting to the American Rescue Plan. The discussion then switches gears over to the appointment of Lanza Butler by Californian Governor Gavin Newsom as California's new U.S. Senator. Butler, a black lesbian woman and staunch advocate for women and workers, is recognized by Shapiro as the most radical senator in America, having once promoted a plan to completely abolish bail across California for criminal suspects. He criticizes Newsom's move as a calculated effort to secure union support for his potential presidential run. Shapiro expressed enjoyment, however, over a potential discord that might arise within the Democratic Party due to Butler's appointment. This, he opined, might lead to an intersectionality fight, where candidates will jostle for the senatorial seat on the basis of their identities, giving rise to conflicts and divisions within the party. Towards the end of the episode, Shapiro lampoons late-night hosts like Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Kimmel, who have resumed shows after writers' strikes. He mocks their reliance on jokes about former President Donald Trump to carry their shows, suggesting that their humor is stale and lacks originality. Lastly, he mentions his plan to discuss a Washington Post article arguing that America needs more atheists in his upcoming show. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.